Good afternoon. So everyone's well caffeinated? Blood sugar's good? Yep. I might pass out. Just kidding. Anybody hear my co-founder Neil talk and ask somebody out earlier? All right, I'm not that entertaining. He's back there though, so he could take my place probably right now. Anyways, I'm gonna get right into it. I only have 20 minutes and 46 or 7 slides. But I'll go really fast. I talk really fast, like yeah, that guy from Micro Machines. Anyways, I don't know if any of you remember Micro Machines? Yeah. See, I'm gonna talk like that at some point, especially when the timer is down. Anyways, I'm supposed to talk about WWWW. Yeah. All right. Come on. There we go. So I've been titling my talks or theming my talks based on a value at our company KISSmetrics. We do analytics stuff. This is where we learned a lot about B2B content marketing and all that. So the value I'm going to use today is be open, listen, and share. I really believe all content is communication. So this is the value that seemed to align with that. I'm running out of values. We only have 5, so I might need to make some more or something. But I think this one's super relevant for the talk today. So the first W, it's probably in the wrong order compared to what you're used to, is actually why. So with content marketing, I think the big question that I get asked a lot isn't the why we should do it, it's more like what we should do. So I've got a lot of content on that, but I did want to address this really briefly in case people don't understand why they should be doing it. So first of all, I like putting this slide in, but basically I can Google it for you. And so what I like to say about that is one of the reasons you do it is because you actually do get a lot of residual traffic if you're doing content marketing really well because of SEO. Regardless of anything, links, linking to your site, to your content cause search engines to find it, cause other people to find it because they're typing stuff in Google. I also can probably out-Google you, so that's another reason I like this slide. Again, there's a ton of content on the web. I actually use Google to create this presentation. And so I'm going to share the best of the best for those 5 W's. There's a pro tip here. There's links at the bottom. My deck is already linked in the talk. It's already up on SlideShare. These links will give you a lot more about the topic than I can tell you in like a minute or 2 or less per slide. So make sure you click on those, enter them in, whatever it may be. But right into it. So people, I looked up the stat. There's a whole company that does sort of content marketing tools called Compost, and they have a whole content marketing stat sort of long page. So I've taken a lot of these stats from them. They're really good. So one of the things I found fascinating was people actually spend more than 50% of their time online looking at content. So that's a reason to do content marketing, of course. This was the most fascinating one that I found. So is anyone here a B2B company that doesn't do content marketing right now? Awesome. Okay, one guy. All right, cool. I talked to him earlier. He might not need to, so he already has like 6,000 something people waiting to use his product. Sorry I shared. It's about sharing though. Anyways, I noticed that a lot of people do content marketing when I started Googling around and finding these stats. But the real reason you do it is it's scalable, it costs less, and it's repeatable. Again, I'm going to get through the why fast because I'm assuming everybody knows they should do it. Most of you in the room are doing it. At KISSmetrics, what we noticed is that when we put our traffic together and the users together between our blog and our website, we noticed that there's a 3x higher sign-up conversion rate when people repeat visit and come back to the site. So that means like they visited our blog and they end up visiting our site again, they end up signing up. And there's a 3x conversion rate to these repeat visitors. So content marketing sort of gets them in earlier than right when they're thinking about signing up. That's the big epiphany there. And then I found a stat, like I was saying. Content marketing costs 62% less than traditional marketing and generates about 3 times as many leads. This totally trends with everything that I've seen. It is cheaper and it does cause more leads. But like with everything else, there's always a problem. So the one thing that I learned in these stats, again, is that 32% of people say they're not, only 32% say they're effectively executing on their content marketing. I found that fascinating as well, because if 90+% are doing it, but only 32% say that they're effectively doing it, I think there's a big gap. And as I was thinking about it, I really wanted to know why, and lo and behold, in that same study, there was an answer. So they had this little graph. You probably can't read it, but I'm going to read through the items in it. That way you can kind of get an idea of the reasons why people think they're not being effective. So number 1 sort of reasons where they think they could be more effective. These are all areas they think they could be more effective. One is producing high quality content. Two is tracking number of qualified leads generated by content marketing efforts. So that's a tracking one. Another one is discovering relevant keywords in their market/industry. Tracking the content utilization metrics. Again, it's a content thing. And this is like visits, views, shares, things like that. Generating social mentions of content. So that's basically social sharing and all that. And then tracking content conversion metrics. Good news is, I'm actually going to talk about most of these topics. Another good news from my own business, KISSmetrics, is that most of this stuff is all about tracking. And that's really why people feel like they won't be effective. So the rest of the 4 W's are these. Basically, who will we write for? What will we write about? What will we post? And where will we socialize? And in my experience talking to companies, these are the basic questions that they can ask and answer. And then they'll basically be able to determine an effective content marketing strategy for them. My talk is about B2B, and it's very skewed B2B, but the same questions can be asked for B2C, and some of the tools and things I recommend can also be used. So first up, who will we write for? Obviously, if you're creating content, you have to write for somebody. And I wanted to get this one out of the way. A lot of people talk about like guest blogging, and what I mean by guest blogging is blogging on other people's sites or other people's blogs. Since there's so many blogs out there, I thought this was a good effective strategy to actually test who you should write for. And the logic here is that other people have audiences, and it's much easier to go write on their blog than put up a blog yourself and start writing on your blog, because they have audiences, they have traffic. And I thought of a bunch of effective sort of strategies for that, so I'm going to review some of these. So obviously you target publications based on existing audiences. And you choose topics by analyzing their existing posts. I've got some tips later on how to do that and some tools, but that's a really effective way to understand basically where you should be guest blogging if you're really trying to test the audience. And now this can be effective early on when you don't have a blog or don't know what you're doing, or the traffic's very low on your own blog. It can also be effective later on when you're trying to figure out how to expand your market. Like let's say your sales team or your product team or whatever, you decide you want to go target a different audience. Guest blogging can be an effective way to understand how that audience is going to sort of respond to your content, and thus also your product and service. It's really important to read, analyze, and respond to comments if you do guest blog somewhere, just because that engagement helps you also understand kind of how people think. And then of course track traffic and conversions from each guest post. You don't necessarily want to write just for conversions on these guest posts. A lot of it is branding and not directly measurable stuff, but you still want to be able to monitor this, because sometimes you can find a big epiphany around guest blog posts that drives a lot of traffic and conversions that you can also align with in terms of the audience that you can reach in other ways as well. And the last one is obviously monitor social media mentions and engagement. There's a ton of opinion that's spit out on Twitter and places like that, especially around content. So it's really awesome to kind of see what happens there, especially when you're dealing with a publication that gets a lot of sort of Twitter shares already. A lot of times you can find a lot of gold in kind of what people are saying, or whether they agree with your opinion or not, or the topic that you're talking about. But moving on. This is, anybody hear Ram talk earlier? He didn't talk about this, but this was actually an awesome talk that he did. The link's at the bottom. And it's probably the most effective, important thing I can talk about when it comes to who you should be targeting. And a lot of times you're like, well, these are my customers. So at KISSmetrics, online marketers are our customers. And those are the people that we would love to use our product, that will pay for our product, that love our product. And that would be in the sort of content and customers that are relevant to current customers. Then there's the whole scale of relevant to potential customers. And then what Rand says you should be targeting, which I wholeheartedly agree with, is relevant to anyone who interacts with your potential customers. I'm going to repeat that. This is about targeting with your content anyone who interacts with your potential customers. The reason this is so powerful is that you're basically creating a brand, and you're also able to amplify any word of mouth you may have just by the content you create. And I know it's a little tough because you might be wondering, I won't get conversions, I won't get signups and things like that. But again, people who visit repeatedly end up converting higher anyways. So you're really not creating content just for conversion. You're actually creating content more for brand and word of mouth, and also to extend your reach. And I'll talk a little bit later about that. So if you have some traffic, you can run some surveys to actually understand who your readers actually are, and a lot of times even who their friends are. So what we did at KISSmetrics is we ran a survey using Qualaroo, which is a little pop-up survey tool, and we asked, what's your primary role? And it was, this was on our KISSmetrics blog. It gets a ton of traffic, so it was pretty easy to get a bunch of responses. But we basically, the options were marketing, engineering, product management, design, and other. And here were the responses. Obviously, our blog's targeted at marketers, and the number one category was marketing. But in terms of the responses, we had a ton of engineering, product management, and even some design. And the rest of it was like agencies and things like that in the other, which we didn't put as a sort of primary role. So even if you don't have the answer to this, you can ask a simple survey question like this to really figure out who's actually reading your current content. You could even do that for your website and ask who's actually visiting your website. This is going to give you a really important sort of directional idea of who that sort of influencer sort of customer to write for or person to write for is, not just your sort of core customer that you want to pay. And at KISSmetrics, we've taken this even further, and we've created our content for babies, especially if you consider pacifier content. So that's my baby, and the theory here, if I were to play it out, is that a lot of people work from home and they have babies, so we might as well put the pacifier in their mouth and give those away. So, so next up, what will we write about? This was really fascinating to me, and this is basically the whole thesis of what to write about. I think it's, I don't see enough people doing it, so I'm going to talk about it, especially with B2B content marketing. Basically, 8 out of 10 people will read your headline, but only 2 out of 10 will read the rest of your post. And you can guess what that means, and I'll get into that in a second. But before I get into that, one mistake I see a lot of people making when they write their content is they actually don't use the words you and I within the content. Which means you're not really speaking to anybody. You're just talking like a research paper. Research papers don't have you and I's. You're not writing research papers. You're creating content that people want to read and engage with. So you and I, just a quick tip, super important to get read and get people engaged with your content. So headlines. I mentioned headlines earlier. This is really the key to what? It's also the key to high quality content. And a lot of my talk, even in other areas, is going to be about this. So here's a bunch of tips. My co-founder recently wrote a whole blog post and an infographic on this, but I'm going to go through each tip one by one really quickly. So one, when you have numbers and negative words in your headlines, your click-throughs on the headlines increase, which means hopefully more people read it. When you keep your headlines under 65 characters, they're just easier for Google and the search results to basically display for you. Otherwise, you get this little cute ... in the search results, which kind of sucks. And then making the headline specific and match the content. So a lot of times you'll get super generic headlines that really don't get clicks or anything like that. Especially they don't really strike people's attention when they look at them. Odd numbers perform better than even ones. There's a whole bunch of scientific proof on this, but you'll see a lot of times even the little dots when you go to like an Apple site with like a bunch of images and they have like 3 dots to indicate that you can keep going. It's usually an odd number of dots. This has something to do with your brain and parsing it. If you look here, I actually have 7 points. This is all on purpose, but odd numbers perform a lot better than even numbers. It has something to do with the human brain so that some scientists can probably explain better than I can. And then the headline, aim for a headline to have 6 words. And obviously the rules can be broken. All rules are meant to be broken. You'll see in an example that I talk about next. And the last one is avoid words that have multiple meanings. That goes back to like context and also not being vague. If something has multiple meanings, it's probably going to be not as specific as you'd like it to be. And then the last one, which I'll have examples for, is include power verbs and interesting adjectives. And sometimes it can be over the top. I'm sure we've all clicked on headlines where the content hasn't sort of backed up what the headline's about. That's not what I'm suggesting here. But what I am suggesting is when you think about creating your content, start with the headline, focus on the headline, and create your content based on the headline. And you can also figure out how to create your content based on the headline much better. This is a quick tip I learned, which is basically when you're using power verbs, you want to be really assertive and use words that create sort of swift action. In terms of adjectives, these are things like effortless, incredible, strange, absolute. Yes, we click on them. Even though they might sound absurd to put them in titles a lot of the time, we actually click on those things. People click on those things, so you might want to add them. Here's a quick example. Co-founder Neil wrote this blog post called 5 Shocking Facts That Will Change Your Entire Approach to Social Media. He hit 5 of the 7 sort of rules that he had. The ones he missed were the 6 words and the 65 characters. You can ask him why he did that, but I would say this is scored pretty high on the title sort of angle. And if you read his blog, you'll see he follows these formulas. Another thing is instead of giving you more examples, he's got a tool. There's a few tools out there like this where you can put in your URL and kind of just learn more about your website. And the key part of the tool is if you put in your URL and then you go to the social media analysis, you're going to see this really cool, like, how many social shares did each piece of content get, little like breakdown. And what I actually tend to do is put in a URL or a competitor's URL and then actually export it to Excel so you can start understanding it. And your whole goal here is understanding what kind of titles, what kind of content is actually popular with all kinds of different channels. And last but not least, this is Sean. He runs our KISSmetrics blog. And Neil actually said a quote about him, and I don't want you guys to forget this, but it's basically he does what he feels is best for the KISSmetrics community, and it shouldn't be any other way. And the reason for that is if you're not writing for the reader, you're not writing for anybody. And so a lot of the times we'll tell him to post some content that we've written, and he'll actually edit the crap out of it or tell us he's not going to post it just because he doesn't feel like it's right for the community. And so having somebody or some method so that you can have quality is great. So I'm running out of time, but I'm going to keep going. So this is the when section. And when it comes to like when to post, I would say it really depends. And the reason for that is everything's changing right now. There's new social media channels. The people that are getting on social media are changing. The way those algorithms work for Facebook's newsfeed is constantly changing. So when you post actually depends heavily on the audience you have and also what the recent changes are on some of these channels. I have a bunch of tips here, and I already talked about social networks sort of changing and things like that. But the biggest thing is use whatever information you can find, whether it's your competitors or your own data, to figure out when you should post. One of the biggest tricks I use that people get sort of shocked by is that if someone signs up, find out when people are signing up for your site or your newsletter, because then you'll understand when they're online. You might want to post content around that time. It's really about finding out when people are online, your people, your visitors, your customers, and trying to post more content around that time. Again, you're unique, you're a unicorn, of course. Last tip on this, people don't get bored when sharing, reading, and learning from high quality content. It's probably one of the biggest lessons I can say. And the reason I would say that is because you can post 20 articles a week. If they're all high quality content and you can keep maintaining that, you're going to get more traffic because people love reading great content. There's a big shortage of great content. There's definitely not a shortage of shitty content, I guess. Anyways, so this is an article I found about how to about the words that work really well when you share with social media and all the different sort of social sites. So you have Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Pinterest, and LinkedIn. And based on the things that are shared, you can guess what the audience is at those social networks. So there's a whole article down there that talks way more about this. But I thought it was really impressive. It was one of the only things that I've seen like that, where it's like analyze sharing on these networks. And based on that, like for example, Pinterest is all about recipes and weddings. Who would have thunk, right? So if you make just a few changes in the timing of your sharing, you can actually dramatically increase post sharing. And it's just a matter of the words you use and also the times you share at. There's a whole bunch of a strong analysis from okdork.com, which is a Noah Kagan's site. They analyze the whole site. They even give you instructions on how to analyze yours. It's a little meaty, but it's really good. And these are a whole bunch of tips that they came up with. Again, it's like a lot of other things. Like it might not work for you, to be honest, but if you have content, you have competitors, you can analyze their stuff and figure out what's working for them. And these processes that are described in the article down here will tell you exactly how to do that. I'm not going to go through these tips. These aren't even my tips, but I have found them to be really useful. And this is the last thing before I'm done. The reason I'm excited about content marketing is because between content marketing and let's say freemium, if you're B2B, these are the strategies that keep on giving. They don't take from you. You don't lose them. Like even at KISSmetrics, our traffic keeps growing. There's some hiccups every now and then, but one of the reasons our brand is large and we can keep sort of harvesting that attention for providing more value to customers is just because we have it and it's pretty massive. And so I would start doing your content marketing efforts as soon as you can, especially if and getting more aggressive about them, especially if you don't have any freemium opportunity with your product or your business. But if you do have freemium or a free thing you can build or whatever it may be, that's also a very effective way to get word of mouth and things like that. That's it.